You guys are great leaders. And I think you inspire us to join. And certainly, I think this group probably doesn't need encouragement to vote, but we can certainly lead by encouraging others to vote, because that's the laws are always important. What we say, what we feel in our hearts, and what we say, and how we interact with people may be up to us largely, but the rules of the society are so important. And that was brought home to me this past week, reading an essay about Juneteenth by New York Times essayist Charles Blow. And I hope you'll indulge me. I'm going to read you some excerpts from this essay because I thought it was particularly thought-provoking about what happens next. So June 19th. So that someone goes and says to people in Texas, guess what? Surprise, you're free. That's great. What does it mean? What did it mean? Well, his essay was entitled, On Juneteenth, Freedom Came with Strings Attached. At that time, and I'm jumping around in the essay, but at that time, most black people couldn't claim their freedom on June 19, 1865, because their bodies and their free will were still being policed to nearly the same degree and with the same inveterate racism that Southern whites had aimed at them during slavery. The laws governing the formerly enslaved were very restrictive in terms of where they could go, what kind of jobs they could have, where they could live in certain communities. As the Rediscovering Black History blog at the National Archives notes, quote, most white Texans desired to keep blacks as close to their formerly enslaved status as possible. Therefore, they fiercely resisted, this is the white majority, fiercely resisted any actions that would potentially elevate blacks to a competitive social, political, and economic status, end quote. This was true throughout much of the former Confederacy, and it was explicit. You probably know this part. Upon arrival in Galveston, the Union General Gordon Granger delivered General Order Number 3, which said, the connection heretofore existing between former masters and slaves would become that between employer and hired labor, and that freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present home and work for wages. So congratulations, you are free to stay on the job and now get paid. But a notice from Granger, published days later in the Galveston Daily News, informed the public what this would mean. Quote, no persons formerly slaves will be permitted to travel on the public thoroughfare without passes or permits from their employers, end quote. In other words, white people would still dictate where black people could be. The following year, in 1866, a Texas state constitutional convention adopted the state's black codes, codifying suffocating limits on black autonomy. As the Texas State Library and Archives Commission described these laws, quote, African Americans without jobs often were assigned to white guardians for work without pay. The penalty for quitting often included imprisonment for breach of contract. Other laws prevented freed men from having free access to public facilities. Stiff fines were levied against African Americans for violating curfews, possessing firearms, or displaying objectionable public behavior, like harsh speeches or insulting gestures. They were not allowed to testify against whites, serve on juries, or in state militias, or vote. In this way, the codes outlined a status for African Americans not too much removed from their earlier condition as slaves. Perhaps the best way, Blow continues, perhaps the best way to consider Juneteenth is not as the moment black people retained freedom, but as a moment in the long-running struggle to realize freedom. When slavery is replaced by a succession of systems, black codes, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, that, though diminished in their brutality, oppress on the same principles, a true comprehensive freedom still eludes. As Corey Walker, the director of the program of African American Studies at Wake Forest University, emphasizes, the idea of freedom, particularly for black people in this country, is continuously being negotiated and contested. So, quote, Juneteenth marks a moment in the ever-evolving and expanding project of American democracy. It is, he said, a project that is never complete. It is never fulfilled, even at the moment of Juneteenth, and it's one that is ever evolving to this day. I thought that was a particularly compelling essay about how, again, we think of these moments, we think of Juneteenth, we think of the Emancipation Proclamation, we think of the adoption of Reconstruction laws as being these monumental times where everything that came afterwards is the opposite of everything that came first. It is not always so. And so it can be sobering to think about how this really is a series of moments that have connections. And it is why Dr. King said something like, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It is long. And it doesn't always move towards justice, but it does bend that way. And thank you, Wendy and Ken, for being two of those benders. Really appreciate that.